Hi, we're Card Group 7. My name's John,
I'm Timothy.
I'm Olivia.
and we'll be showing you our card game called Last Card Standing today.
One player will create a lobby, and the other will join that lobby. Then each player will need to select one of the player options. If one player selects player 1, then the other will get an error trying to select player 1 as well. Once player 1 and player 2 have been selected, the game can start. A player can play a card that either matches the number or suit of the pile card, except the player can always play an ace, and if they play it 2, then they can play 2 cards.
So if a card can't be played, then that animation will show up and the sound as well. So that's our reach component, is the red cross and then that sound. And after you play a card that's valid, the turn will rotate like that. And the update button is meant to update both the player's turn for the other person and also update the chart in the top, which is also one of our requirements. And it'll fill that with the correct card counts.
So, when a player plays a 2 card, it essentially remains your turn after playing the card, allowing you to play an additional card. So, in this example, we played the 2 and the 8 right after. Yeah, that's what the 2 card does. So, the 2 is only one of the special cards. The other special card is the ace, which we'll demonstrate in a second. As you can see, the ace can be placed no matter what the suit or number is on the pile deck. So it can be just placed no matter what, as long as it's your turn. And then finally, in order to win, the objective is to just get rid of all of your cards. And as you can see, once player 2 gets rid of all of her cards, the screen will display player 2 wins, and it will display also a noise. And then once player 1 hits update, it'll also display player 2 wins and play the same noise. And it'll exit out of the application once the game is finished.
The app begins with the option to choose to create a new lobby or join a new lobby. Creating a new lobby will then erase and reset the shared values in ThinkSpeak, while joining a new lobby doesn't, ultimately allowing multiplayer. Clicking on the player buttons writes into ThinkSpeak, which then the start button over here will then check if both players have been written into, and then once both players have been written into, then the game can finally start.
All right, so there's a few functions that are just used when we initialize the app that I'm going to explain now. So the deal function will deal out 7 cards, and it'll set that to draw a card, and then it'll make app.hand1 in each user, so one person on one ThinkSpeak and one person on the other ThinkSpeak. It'll give them a card, and it'll set the image source from the image, and it gets the image source from the function getImage, which is up here. And what getImage does is it has an image array with all of the names of the images, and it has another version of the deck that isn't having cards taken out of it through the draw function, and it will figure out, it'll take the card that you play or input into it, and it'll match them up, and then it'll give you the image name when you index it. And then fill table, when we get card count, what it'll do, because we check card count at the end of several functions, it'll write that, it'll read ThinkSpeak, and it'll write into the table the card count right here and over here. And then another function we'll talk about later is the win function. So basically, win function will check the card counts again, and if one of the card counts is 0, if someone has won, it'll turn off all of the elements, and then it will check which player won through ThinkSpeak again. It'll show the text, and then it'll delete the app. And then the rules function, that's actually a callback. The rules button, just when you click it, it makes the label visible, the label shows up, and then the close button turns on, and the close button will just get rid of the label. So.
Alright, so when a normal card is played, it first... So yeah, this is our play function. It's basically called anytime when someone puts down a card. When a normal card is played, it first checks if it's your turn, then it changes your card into a character vector because all the cards are entered as strings. It will then index that character vector to find the suit and number of that card that you just played, and then it will check if the suit or number matches, or if the card played is an ace, which means the ace can be played at any time. So if it's ace, it'll play anytime. If not, the user will get alerted that it's not a playable card, and yeah, when it's not a playable card, you'll see that it'll flash red with a big red X over the pile, and also make like a error sound. And if it is a number 2 card, we print ThinkSpeak, which the user played the card. Just to go a little bit more in depth about the animation and the noise for our reach component, what we essentially do is we have an image that I named can't place. It's the overlap, that's the big red X over the card. I basically have it turning on and off with a pause of 0.2 seconds in between each to just give the illusion of it flashing a red X over the pile. And also it'll play a sound, app.error, which is another audio file that we loaded into MATLAB, that it loads in when you start the game. And yeah, that just plays whenever you try to place a card that doesn't match the suit or number that's on the top of the pile. So, in your hand, you'll have 7 cards, each with their own image, and for each of those cards, there's a function called card blank image clicked. What this function does is it first calls to the play function and checks if the card is playable, so if it can be placed into the pile deck. If it can be placed into the pile deck, it'll remove that card from your hand, and then yeah, it'll also check if the card you place into the deck is 2. If it is 2, it'll use a function called rotate 2, and if it's not 2 or any other card, it'll just simply do the regular rotate.
Okay, so this is our normal rotate function, which is called whenever something that's not the 2 is played. So it reads ThinkSpeak to figure out what player it is, and so basically if the player is 1, it'll change it to 2. If the player is 2, it'll change it to 1, because it reads and then writes. And then if you are player 1, it'll check the length of your hand, or if you're player 2, it'll check the length of your hand and then write it to whichever card count is associated with your player number, and that's how we'll eventually populate the table later on and such. And then it'll check who wins, so it'll call that win function from earlier. And then we've created app.imageElements here. That'll be important later. But there's a switch case that reads it reads which player it is, and then that'll populate the text so that if it's not your turn, you know that it's the other person's turn. And then down here, if your hand length is less than or equal to 7, it'll call that get image thing, and then it'll get image will form an image array. It'll be image 1 through 7. Or 1 through 5, 1 through, and so on. But if your length is less than 7, you will also need to form an array of the elements that aren't populated, so it'll be 7 minus 1 to the length, so it'll be anything that's not part of your array, and that will not be visible anymore, so it'll turn those off, and that's that part. And then it'll turn all of the image elements from 1 to however long your thing is on, so that it'll reset from any other cards being played if you're like drawing or something like that. And then rotate 2, and then it'll repopulate the table, so it'll call that table function to make it write again, and then it'll write to the ThinkSpeak channel, it'll write what you played as the pile card. So what your play card was will become the pile card in the play function, and then it'll write that to ThinkSpeak so that the other player knows. Now if a 2 is played, what happens is rotate isn't called at all. It doesn't rotate turns at all. So this is just some of the code from the rotate function that needs to happen in order for it to still work, but it just doesn't change which player it is. And that's rotate.
All right, well that was our card game project. I hope you guys enjoyed watching and enjoyed our explanation, and
thank you
for
watching.
Wait, this literally worked.